You've probably been told your prayer life isn't good enough. That real prayer means long hours on your knees, eloquent words, and feeling something powerful every time. If that's the standard you're measuring yourself against, I need to tell you something. That standard is a myth, and believing it might be the exact thing keeping you from seeing how deep your prayer life actually already is. Here are 5 myths about prayer versus what's actually true, and by the end, you may realize your prayer life has been deeper than you thought the entire time. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Marcus. Marcus prayed every day, short prayers mostly, sometimes just a sentence while driving to work. He never felt the tears other people talked about. He never had the dramatic breakthroughs he heard about from the pulpit. For years, he assumed that meant his prayer life was weak, maybe even that he wasn't praying right. Then one Sunday, his pastor said something that stopped him cold. Some of the deepest prayers ever recorded in Scripture are one sentence long. Marcus went home and looked it up. He was right. And Marcus realized every myth he'd believed about prayer had been quietly convincing him he was failing at something he was actually doing exactly the way Scripture describes. That's what we're unpacking today. 5 of those myths, and the truth underneath each one. Myth number 1. A deep prayer life means long prayers. This is probably the most common one. We measure spiritual depth in minutes, like it's a workout. 20 minutes feels serious. 2 minutes feels lazy. Here's the truth. Some of the most powerful prayers in Scripture are barely a sentence long. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 4. Before answering the king's question, a moment that could change the entire course of his nation. Scripture says simply, I prayed to the God of heaven. That's it. No paragraph. No performance. Just an instant, silent prayer in the middle of a conversation, and it moved a king's heart. Length was never the measure God used. Marcus prayed like that every single day and thought it meant nothing. Myth number 2, you have to feel something for the prayer to count. If you didn't cry, didn't feel peace wash over you, didn't sense some spiritual high, it's easy to walk away thinking the prayer didn't work, or worse, that God wasn't listening. Here's the truth. Feeling nothing doesn't mean praying nothing. Psalm 88 is the only psalm that ends without a single note of resolution or comfort. The psalmist cries out, and the chapter just ends in darkness. No emotional payoff, no warm feeling. And it's still in Scripture, still called a prayer, still counted as worship. If a prayer with zero emotional resolution made it into the Bible as an example of real prayer, then your dry, feelingless prayers were never disqualified. They were never the wrong kind of prayer. They were just prayer. Myth number 3. Silence during prayer means God isn't there. This is the one that quietly damages people's faith the most. You sit down to pray, you wait, and nothing. No sense of presence, no answer. It's easy to interpret that as absence. Here's the truth. Silence is not always absence. Sometimes it's God asking you to trust Him without evidence. Habakkuk chapter 1 verse 2 opens with the prophet crying out, How long, Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen, and God doesn't answer immediately. The silence stretches for the length of an entire chapter before God finally responds. That silence wasn't punishment. It was preparation for a deeper answer than Habakkuk was ready for at the start. If your prayers have felt met with silence, you're not praying wrong. You may be in the exact position Habakkuk was, waiting for an answer God is still preparing. Myth number 4. Repeating the same prayer over and over means you lack faith. If you've prayed for the same thing for months, maybe years, it's easy to start feeling like your persistence is actually proof you don't really believe God will answer. Like a real faith would only need to ask once. Here's the truth. Repetition in prayer isn't weak faith. Jesus commanded it. Luke chapter 18 verse 1 introduces the parable of the persistent widow with this direct instruction. Jesus told his disciples they should always pray and never give up. Not pray once and trust. Pray relentlessly, repeatedly, without losing heart. The repetition you felt guilty about was never evidence of doubt. It was the exact posture Jesus told his followers to have. And here's the last one. The myth Marcus didn't figure out until the pastor's sermon that day. Myth number 5. Praying about small, ordinary things is a waste of God's time. You save prayer for the big stuff, the diagnosis, the job loss, the crisis. But the small, daily stuff, where you left your keys, a hard conversation at work, feeling anxious about nothing in particular, that feels too small to bring to God. So you just don't. Here's the truth. Nothing is too small for God to hear. Philippians chapter 4 verse 6 doesn't say pray about your major crises. It says in everything, by prayer and petition, present your requests to God. Everything. Not the filtered, big enough version of your life. All of it. The instinct to bring even small things to Him in prayer isn't a waste of His time. It's actually one of the clearest signs of genuine intimacy with Him, because you don't bring small things to someone you don't trust. Here's what these 5 myths have in common, and why they matter more than they seem. Every one of these myths quietly teaches you to distrust your own relationship with God, to assume you're doing it wrong instead of recognizing you might already be doing it right. 2 Corinthians 11:3 warns that our minds can be led astray from sincere devotion to Christ, and discouragement about your own prayer life is one of the most effective ways that happens, because it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like humility. It isn't. Marcus spent years believing he had a weak prayer life. The truth was, he had a faithful one. He just never had the right measuring stick to see it. If you recognized yourself in any of these 5 myths, the short prayers, the silence, the repetition, the small requests, I need you to hear this. Your prayer life may already be deeper than you've given yourself credit for. James 5:16 says the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. It doesn't say long, doesn't say emotional, doesn't say polished. Just powerful and effective, exactly as it is. Don't let another year go by measuring your prayer life against a standard scripture never set. The enemy doesn't need you to stop praying. He just needs you to believe your prayers don't count. Don't hand him that win. Tell me in the comments which myth you've believed the longest. I read every single one. And if you're ready to see your prayer life the way God sees it, pray this with me. Lord, strengthen my prayer life and help me see it the way you already do.